Okay, I think we'll get started. My name is Jim Troutfetter. I'm the lay leader for the Engage Your Mind lecture series. So thank you all for coming. Should be an interesting evening. And I thought what I'd do is I'm going to have Pastor Dale DeRee, who's our formation pastor, if you haven't met him yet, come up and introduce our speakers because he knows them very, very well and what they do.
Dale.
Yes. As I tripped coming up. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, one of my privileges is I get to resource Jim and the Engage Your Mind lay team and their work that put these together. I also get to resource Connie, too, in prayer, so I've got a pretty good job, if you ask me. So we're excited to have you here tonight. The two people that you see up here are both friends of mine, and so I'll introduce them kind of a little bit more as like friends of mine, but they're also like have very official titles and do very important things in the world, right?
We'll tell you all those.
We'll tell you all about those things. But Stephanie and I have been friends we're approaching 20 years now, which is hard to believe. And one thing that you need to know about Stephanie is she cannot miss an opportunity to tease me about how old I am. So some point tonight, you'll hear something about how old I am. But Stephanie and I got to co-lead a leadership development program for 5 years together. Then we did 2 years of teaching and co-teaching together. She was my boss at that point, and then we've done a lot of collaborative work over the years. Stephanie is the lead pastor of Mill City Church, and if that church sounds a bit familiar to you, it's because Westwood and Mill City are collaborating together on a church plant as part of our 30th celebration. We're working on the plant of Garden City Church, and that is a church that is being led by Chris and Ellen Aldrich. And so Chris was the campus pastor at Bush Lake. Probably most of you know that. Also, Mill City is a daughter church of Woodridge, which is a sister church of ours. So we're all related, very much so. And so Pastor Steph has a significant ministry, not only at Mill City, but also she's written a couple of books. She co-leads a podcast, and she and Joe Saxton have a ministry presence that's actually national and maybe even international a little bit. And so really happy to have her here tonight. And I have learned a lot from Stephanie about bridging differences and learned a lot about what goes into being present to people and being able to learn and listen from people who are different than myself. And so I'm excited that she's here. And then my friend Ramon is here also. Ramon and I have been friends also a long time from that same leadership development program that I was co-leading with Stephanie. We had Ramon come and do some training and teaching with our students. Ramon has led global relief efforts through a ministry that he started, but used it also as an opportunity to teach people how to be present to culturally different people and how to do that in effective ways. And I was privileged to be part of some training that he did, an experience that I was on a trip with him. And so I've been very influenced by him and developing, hopefully, to be better at being able to bridge difference, especially cultural difference. And so Ramon is a content expert in this area. He has his doctorate. He teaches, he trains, and he does a lot of consulting work with organizations around bridging difference and the topic that we're doing together tonight. So I'm very excited to have two of my friends here tonight, and I hope that you'll feel blessed by learning from them. Will you join me in welcoming Stephanie and Ramon?
All right, thanks, Dale. Wow, that was a really nice introduction. The thing I'll say I'll just cut right to the thing about your age, since you promised that. I think I just turned the age I first teased Dale about being. And we'll just leave it at that. You've been friends long enough that whatever age I was teasing you about, I have now passed over that age for a little bit here, so that's a long friendship. Want to say just a little bit more about your experience and background, and then I'll talk a little bit, and then we'll get going here.
You know, just to make it quick here, because that was just a great introduction.
That was really
Thank
nice.
you, Dale.
That was nice, Dale.
Just one thing that I will say, talking about being family and being related. It was in 2010, after the Haiti earthquake, that this community packed 285,000 meals with my organization to be delivered into Haiti through our connections in the Dominican Republic. So thank you so much. Just a little bit about me. My background is in the medical field. I came here in 1991. I was just sharing the big day of the Halloween storm.
Yeah.
That's why I came here, and I was a surgical consultant for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, then Medtronic, and then ethical endosurgery. And one day I felt this pull that said, I need you to be doing something different. And all my friends tried to convince me to go to Bethel, and eventually, kicking and screaming, I went to Bethel. And it was, I think, a journey of about 10 years, 10 really good years. But that served as the foundation for what I do today. So I bring a lot of this neuroscience, sociocultural anthropology, psychology, all this experience working in different parts of the world. That's what I try to bring into this conversation today.
Yeah, and I, like Dale said, I'm the lead pastor at Mill City. I'm a church planter. We're about almost 17 years into planting the church, which in the theme of age, I was about 12 when we started, obviously, if it's been 17 years. But I'm really honored because Ramon is a part of my leadership team at Mill City and has been just a huge supporter of the work that we're doing as a church, but also as we're a part of, I don't know if we've noticed, we're here because we've noticed there's some divisive times. Yes. And he has a lot of experience in peacemaking, and so that's a big, broad subject, but I've also seen you do that in very specific ways with specific people in our community, and I'm so grateful. And so when we talked a little, maybe over a year ago now, about how important this concept and this work is, we began to dream about how we could pull together our experiences with working with people, working with peacemaking, coaching and consulting, pastoring and leading, and how we could offer an opportunity for people to grow in their skills. And I'm going to say grow in their skills as a way of leading you into understanding that tonight is actually a little bit more interactive than maybe you thought you signed up for, okay? But don't worry. It's going to be very clear. We're going to walk through things. We're not going to ask anyone to come up here and talk into the microphone. You don't have to speak to the whole group, but we are going to ask you to interact with another human tonight. And so just be prepared for that. And people at home, I know there's some people watching at home and they maybe don't have a human to interact with, but if you do have a human in your home, get them into the room to interact with you at this time, or at least a cat or a puppy or something. Or if you really don't have somebody at home, then no, you're going to need to practice what we're teaching tonight with someone else. That's my warning for everybody.
Or Zoom chat room.
Or Zoom chat room. I don't know if they're in the Zoom room or not, but either way. Or people who are watching this maybe later. Okay. We're really honored to be here, and thanks to Dale and the team for inviting us. We are going to go through a few different steps on what it means to be peacemakers in polarized times. If we're Jesus followers, then this is a critical, important conversation for us. And so we're going to look at even what Jesus says about this. We're also going to look really practically at what we know is happening in sociology in the world today. And then really practically, we're going to talk about the steps that we take to become deeper peacemakers in our everyday spaces, the places where we find ourselves all the time. That's what we're going to talk about today. So now I have given you a few seconds to be warned about your interaction time. And now I'm going to tell you that you need to find somebody you did not come with tonight, and you need to sit next to them. We're asking everybody in just a minute, you're going to need to move around the cabin, and you're going to find somebody that you did not come with tonight and sit next to them, and we want groups of 2, okay? If we really have an odd number, then we'll figure it out. But otherwise, we're going to do that. And then we're going to begin passing out these booklets, and I'm asking you not to open it until we say go, okay? So what are we not going to open? The booklet until we say go. Okay. All right. So stand up, find somebody, and we're going to pass out the booklets as we find our pairs. And if you would love to move closer to the front, you can also do that at this time. Move closer to the front. Why not? Find your partner. Everybody gets one. Yes. Yep. Everyone gets one. Once you find your partner, we've got a question for you up front, a question for you to ask your partner. In what parts of your life are you around people who have views that are different than your own? Name one part of your life where you're around people whose views differ from your own. And if it's your marriage, just tell them. That's fine. Go ahead. So talk with your partner, your new partner, introduce yourself. In what parts of your life are you around people whose views are different than your own? Okie dokie. We're up. So they can turn the page one page at a time. There's no clock in here. Yeah, I put my phone because there's no clock. Usually there's a clock in the back or something. All right, make sure your partner gets to share. Switch if you didn't get to hear the other person's answer to the question. All right, finish up your conversation. Your booklets are getting passed around here. Make sure everyone has a pen and a booklet. If people are watching at home, I believe that the packet should have been emailed as a PDF. So you can open that up now and, don't scroll through. If I told people in the room not to scroll, they probably already scrolled through it at home, didn't they? Whatever. That's fine. All right. We're going to go one page at a time, okay? One page at a time. So you can open up to page number 1 page at a time, okay? Please don't sneak past because it just ruins our brilliant experience we're going to have tonight, okay? Go ahead, Ramon.
All right, so this is an immersive interactive experience, which means we will be introducing some of the concepts, but you are going to be the better teacher because you're going to have to learn it and then you have to put it into practice, okay? Now, when we do these immersive interactive experiences, what is really important is what we learn is never to assume that we have shared meaning. And by that is, if you look at the language, the participation agreement, a lot of these things mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. So assuming that we all are understanding these things the same way probably will get us in trouble. So just a few things, right? Be respectful. You expect that in a place like this, everybody's going to be respectful, right? But we will be remiss if we don't bring it in, right? Because we know that out there are a lot of incivility, as you will hear in a moment. Be present and engaged. I know your cell phones, are trying to fight for your attention, but be present and engaged, especially when you are talking to, with other people. Rather than language policing, this is something that happened, I don't see it much in churches, but in different settings where people try to fix other people or try to set other people straight because they're using a language that is a little bit different. We don't want to do that. Just, if there's something that doesn't resonate with you, find the right time to connect with that person and ask, grant the grace of positive intent. I will say also listen to learn. This is a great opportunity. Every time that I see a group of people like this, I see 120 people, 120 different ways to see the world, 120 different ways that God has created us. So each and every one of us here brings something unique. Different genius in the way that we engage with the world. So we want to make sure that we do that. And again, no guilt, no shame, no blame. That doesn't help. And we know that that's not, what Christ came to, to teach us. And the other things that we love doing is this, just, clarifying the difference between debate and dialogue. Debate, practically, I have to defeat you. That's what the word means, Now, dialogue from the Greek, dia, through, logo, words, finding meaning to the words. Finding meaning through our connections. That's what we want to do today, have dialogue, okay? Steph?
All right. You don't actually have to sign this and turn it in, but if you'd like to sign it just for your own integrity, go for it. But we're not actually asking you to turn it in. But let's all agree to these principles tonight, and then that helps lower the anxiety. Has anyone noticed that talking about polarization brings up people's anxiety? A couple of you are like, not me, I'm not kind of shake. It does. Actually, the studies say that it's around 60 to 80% of people just thinking about this topic makes them feel anxious. And so we're doing this just to help lower that anxiety and say we're all here and we're all agreeing to this today. And then we can turn the page and you're going to see also in regards to lowering anxiety, you'll see exactly where we're going to go here today. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some of the steps are going to go faster than the others. So if you get to a point and you're thinking, my goodness, promise, Ramon, Steph, we've been on step 2 for a long time or something like that. Don't worry about it. We understand that at some point we will let you go home tonight. So we will keep, but some of the steps are a little quicker than others, but they're all important in our opinion, okay? So now you can turn to page 3. And we want to just make sure, speaking of shared meaning, that we discuss what we mean when we're talking about polarization, okay? So this is a definition that we're going to use tonight. You might have a different definition, but this is the one that we're going to use to have a shared definition today. A state in which the opinions, beliefs, or interests of a group or society no longer range along a continuum, but become concentrated at opposing extremes. The polarization, the views are not as spread out as at times they are. Now polarization means they are less spread out across a spectrum. Now they are spread far apart from each other. No longer range along a continuum, but become concentrated at opposing extremes. This is something that we're definitely seeing. And you've been reading a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
We've got some stats here you can read, but what have you been reading about recently?
Absolutely. So we started on this journey probably, I will say, 10 years ago. But it was until last year that the Society for Human Resources and Management began to do some research tracking incivilities, polarization, and some of these, conflict and difficult conversations that people were having at work. And what we know is that more than half the U.S. population, working population, agree that they are experiencing these incivilities and this, polarization at work. There are more than 202 million acts of incivility per day. I'm talking just workforce. That translates to $2 billion per day lost in productivity, about $349 billion additionally lost because people are not able to manage those conflicts. People, mental health issues, just because, this incivility that are going on. Most of them come from people disagreeing on social issues, politics. Some of them are generational, misunderstanding, and some of them are also racial and ethnic issues. But the reality is that this is taking a toll in our society, but also in our workforce. Now, the data that I gave you is just in the workplace. Now, think about what's happening outside the workplace when we spend more than 13.1 hours per day in social media or any other media outlets.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's, $2 billion, that's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
But it's just money. We're talking about people's souls. We can't even measure the toll that it's taking on our souls to be in this spot. When you look at these statistics that we have here, and this is just a little snippet, we didn't want to overwhelm you with statistics, but 55% of Americans report having no one in their immediate social circle who has opposing political views. That's a new stat. That's a lot of people. That is a lot of people who are not around people who are engaging them around difference, even in politics. We're not only talking about politics tonight. That is one area that feels very acute right now, doesn't it, when it comes to polarization? But we see this along all those same different groups that are different topics that Ramon just mentioned. And so tonight we're going to be talking about skills that we can use overall, not only in political conversations. But I think at the core, one of the things we want to make sure we know is that at the bottom there you can see of the page 3, polarization is much larger and more powerful than any one of us. Regardless of what positions we may have, what sides we may take, polarization is a force we are all up against. This is important. It doesn't matter what sides anyone's on anything. This is the common enemy. Polarization is our collective enemy that we're against. It's a force that we're up against. It's causing chasms through families, distrust between neighbors, inability to function in our teams at work. And so for us, the question isn't how much money are we going to lose? What are all the statistics? What about this? What about that? The question is, what does this mean for us as followers of Jesus? How are we people to engage differently than what's happening in the midst of the world? And that's what we want to talk about tonight. So if you turn the page, you'll see there's just a little bit more about being able to understand polarization and the state of polarization. I have found that things that are difficult like this, it helps a little bit to just have an understanding that when we say polarization is a force we're up against, these are things that are happening to us within society, within sociology, within our psychology, within our brain chemistry, that we can have some agency over, But these are going to happen by default unless we choose to have agency and say, let's do something different here. So just want to give a couple things quick. You can read more. I won't read all of this. But there's psychological drivers of polarization. Because someone might just say, why are we caught in this? Why is this so bad? And it is statistically worse than it has been in at least 50 years right now. But why? Why is it so bad? Well, there are psychological drivers of polarization. There's predispositions we develop in childhood. There are really differences in moral priorities. We actually have brains that are wired differently than each other. There's a diversity of voices in society more and more, right? But there's a fear of difference that many of us have since we were little kids. We also see that there's these 5 foundations of moral formation. These are things that I bet everybody in this room would care about all of these things. Care, fairness, loyalty, authority, sanctity. We care about these things. You know actually where the biggest differences come? It's which order of importance we put them in. And so if one person's talking to someone else and care is at the top for them and care is at the bottom for someone else, it doesn't mean that they don't both have the same sense of importance. These things matter, but they're putting them in a different order, and that actually creates a very different perspective, even if everybody agrees with these things. Depending on the order of importance, moral decision making is going to be very different. And you'll see that we have all on the paper there, all of the different places where we got this information if we did not come up with it ourselves. And then finally, when we realize that we've all had very different life experiences, and when you put your genetic makeup, the way you're wired, the way your brain works, plus the life experiences you have, you're going to have subconscious patterns to how we respond to stimuli, to things that come at us. Subconscious, meaning we're not even thinking about it. We have gut responses, and what one person's gut response is might be totally different as someone else's to the exact same stimuli. Here's just one example that we can see. This is from the book The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. For example, people who lean conservative are more excited, their brain chemistry fires by threat, and thus they're motivated by protectiveness and safety. People who lean more liberal are more excited, their brain fires by variety and newness of experience, and thus they're more motivated towards progress. Neither of these things are negative unless they're taken to the extreme. And when they're extreme, we're starting to see polarization, right? So what is good? The thing is that we want people to care about protectiveness and safety. This is how, at one point, the humans were saved from bears, right? We needed people. That's how we are wired. We need some people who prioritize protectiveness and safety. But there's also a necessity for us to be people who have an interest in variety and newness and moving towards progress, or none of us would live in America. I mean, right? That's how nobody would try new things. There wouldn't be new things that would start. That's how these are good things. It's just that when they go to the extreme, and when we're in surroundings where we're around people who are having the same responses we do, because very few people are around people who think different, what happens is it gets to a point where those are farther and farther and farther and farther apart. And back when we were hunters and gatherers, we really needed people that did both of these things. And now we still need people that are both thinking this way, but we've convinced ourselves in lots of ways that we don't. We don't need the people who respond differently or have those different life experiences. That's what the world is telling us. So just a little bit about that. We could talk for the whole 2 hours about the actual state of polarization, but we want to move on to the core for why we're here, and that is when we really think about what it means for us as Jesus followers. When we think about the way of Jesus, and you can turn to the page 5, when we think about the way of Jesus, the heart for us as peacemakers, maybe we think about the word peacemaker, that might mean something different to a coworker of yours who's not a person of faith. But for us, the concept of peace and peacemaking comes from the Hebrew word shalom, which I'm sure that you've heard sermons about. The word shalom, it's not just, peace, right? It's deep. It's not the absence of war or stress or anxiety. That's just escapism. Shalom is wholeness, completeness, fulfillment, inner rest, living without deficiency or lack. And that's the thing that we're pursuing as peacemakers. We're pursuing that. But let's just note, it's not the same as peacekeepers. Peacekeepers fits more in that escapism part. Peacekeepers is stepping away from conflict. Peacemakers step into it in healthy ways so that we can pursue what God promises is our future hope when Jesus returns and restores all things to wholeness and completeness. And we are to seek that kingdom coming in our midst. That's what it means for us as Jesus followers. I know many of you have done a lot of reading in the Sermon on the Mount. We just preached through the Sermon on the Mount at Mill City, but just a couple of quotes from the Sermon on the Mount. So I thought the best thing we could do is bring the words of Jesus just right here, but this is what Jesus talks about. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Basically, Jesus is saying, hey, you know what our family does? We're peacemakers. This is what it means to be in our family, to be in the family of God, to be children of God. Jesus takes it to couldn't get much more clear than this to say, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. You see, that's what our family does. That's what he's saying. That's what the family does. And then Jesus is saying at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, it's not enough to just believe this in our mind and heart, but to put it into action and to be those who hear the words and put them into practice. And that's why we're leaning in on what it means to put these things into practice together. So could we find other places in Scripture that root us in what it means to be peacemakers? Absolutely. But we chose the Sermon on the Mount because it's the Sermon on the Mount and it's Jesus' words. But I just think if you looked at the whole of the story of God, it's a pursuit of shalom. That is who God is. That's God's heart for the world that God loves. And so we get to join in what God is doing. Jesus invites us to join in what he's doing in the world around us to be people who are peacemakers. It's our unique calling as people who are made in the image of God and living the way of Jesus. And that means there's a distinct why that we have that Ramon will talk through. What is our distinct why for all of us as Jesus followers?
Yeah, I'm still processing. When you say a scary bear, you look at me.
I said a scary bear.
Yeah. So anyway,
you're still feeling.
okay.
You're still feeling personal.
I'm still feeling it. I'm taking it personal. What is our distinct way? So we are people empowered to live the way of Jesus, right? In First John, chapter 2. If we are his disciple, we must live as Jesus lived. That's the expectations that that expectation doesn't come from your pastor or from us. It's come from Christ himself. We believe that all humans are made in the image of God. It is right at the beginning, in Genesis. God created human with differences and in that diversity, we see more of the breadth of the image of God. This is one of the most beautiful things that I have found from a neuroscience perspective, especially when you look at Psalm 139, the unique care that God takes in creating each and every one of us so unique. Each brain print in this group right here is very different. There are not two people in this room processing what we are saying, what you are experiencing the same way. It is awesome just to see how our God works. And we represent Jesus to those around us. There is a quote that I just really love that goes, live your life in such a way that those who do not know God but know you may come to know God because they know you. They see God in you. They see the characters of God in you. They see his compassion, his grace, his kindness, generosity, his unconditional love. So we are people. If we say that we are followers of Christ, that is our way of being. And there's not two ways about it, right?
Right.
All right.
Okay, you ready? Step 1, turn the page to page 6. Guess what? The number one step is self-awareness. We got to start with ourselves and move from ourselves out. So you'll see that we use some tools from Braver Angels, and so this is adapted from Braver Angels. And I'm actually going to ask you quietly to answer these questions at your seat, and don't look at anyone else's answers. You're not going to have to share your answers or turn them in, and there's not going to be any grading. But what we're asking you to do is to read through, using the following questions, to think about your, what we're calling, inner polarizer. Don't worry, most of us think and feel some of these things. Everybody thinks and feels some of these things, all right? So we're just going to have about a minute for you to fill this out, 2 minutes for you to fill this out. And there's a little timer here. It's a little Pac-Man that's going to fill up as a circle, okay? So you know how much time you have. Go ahead.
Dun, dun,
No music. No music.
Oh, okay. How are we doing? Good?
Okay, a couple people might just be finishing up. Do not look at anyone else's answers. We're not going to ask you to share your answers, but what we're going to do is just give you a minute to answer this question with your partner, okay? And the question is, what is one insight you gained from this self-assessment? All right? So I'll give you an example. An example when I first took this was when I looked at number 6, how often do I find myself assuming that Christians who hold views opposite of mine are not true Christians? And I was like, well, sometimes, you know? And what I realized, the realization I had at that moment was, I don't want to be somebody who decides who's a true Christian or not. That's not my job. Yikes, right? So like a realization that you're having in this moment. And so it doesn't, there is no right or wrong. It's just what is coming up in your mind. You don't have to answer your score was, but we're going to give you a minute to each share with your partner the answer to this question, and you'll have another little timer here. So go ahead, talk with your neighbor about one insight you gained from this self-assessment. All right, finish up your conversation. Thank you for engaging with that. All right, turn over to page 7. And what I want to point out here on page 7 is if we're going to say that polarization is a force that we're all up against, then Braver Angels has kind of identified the 4 agents of polarization that are coming for our brains and our hearts and sometimes our words and our relationships, okay? These are the 4 agents of polarization that are things that are happening within our minds and our hearts for most of us. And we see a lot of these things talked about in Scripture in different places too, but when it comes to these 4 agents of polarization, the reason that we want to look at what these are and think about it is because we want to become better at noticing them when they come up in our minds. Because if we start to notice them in our minds, then we can say, okay, let me take this to my heart. Do I want to be somebody who shows contempt? Do I want, and then hopefully it doesn't come out of our mouths. And then we can start to bring those things to the Lord. And if it comes out of our mouth, it's with a partner, a process partner to help us to work through some of that stuff. Okay, so what are these agents of polarization that lead to that inner polarizer? First of all, stereotyping, a generalized belief about a group of people as though all the people in that group have the exact same similar traits. Oh, that's such an easy one to do, isn't it? Dismissing, to decide that something or someone is not important and not worth considering. Again, part of our true why as Jesus followers is we believe everyone's made in the image of God. And so if we're dismissing people before we even get to know them because we've stereotyped them, then there's ridiculing, to laugh at someone in an unkind way, unkind words or actions that make someone or something look stupid. The reality of ridiculing is usually that comes out of us because of our own insecurities. When we feel solid in who we are, we don't need to ridicule anyone else in our minds, in our hearts, or in our words. But so many of us find ourselves being like, oh, that's so dumb, stupid, idiots, like these words that we don't want to be people that think that about people, much less say it. And then finally, contempt, a strong feeling of disliking and having no respect for someone or something. I realize it's very difficult when you deeply disagree with someone to find some respect in there. But can we really see someone else as another human made in God's image if we have zero respect for them as a human? Could we find at least the fact that they're made in God's image a reason why they're worthy of respect? What could we confront in ourselves? If we can notice these things in ourselves, then we can begin to have some metacognition and think, wait, well, hold on, that's stereotyping, whoop, that's ridiculing, and we can begin to work on changing our gut responses to that and bring those things to the Lord in prayer and conversations with people. And then maybe when you take this quiz in a few months or a year, you'd have different answers to the questions. But unless we confront these agents of polarization, we're not going to be able to get there. All right. Are is it you or me? I just did that.
It's me.
It's you. Okay. It's you.
All right, slide. Here we go. So I started sharing with you a little bit about Nielsen media data that they provided with regard how much time we spend listening, looking, going through social media or any type of media, right? And I said it was 13.1 hours for adults. That is more time that we spend sleeping and eating, all right? So your high schooler are spending about 10 to 12 hours. And then we have something called 24/7 connected. Doesn't mean that they are actually in the internet, but that means that they have their alerts on all the time. Yeah, that's also competing for their attention. And then you have your teenagers, middle schooler, which are spending between 6 and 8 hours in this, type of realm. So the point that we're trying to make here is that social media has become one of the biggest, influencer in the way that we think. It is becoming more powerful in the way that we program our mind. It used to be our parents, used to be our education, used to be our church. Social media is more powerful than all of those together, right? So what I would like for you to do is to take this self-awareness, just a little test that one of our own, Rachel Whiteman, created. She is the author of Faith and Fake News, a guide to consuming information wisely. Does she have the book in our website? Yes. Yes, so her book is on our website as a resource, and she's also is a great speaker, so I had the blessing of, going to some event with her and, being able to showcase some of this example on how social media have influenced us. So if you can take this, quiz, and then what we would like for you to do is to have a conversation. But let's just take the quiz first.
Pac-Man has begun.
All right, begin to wrap it up. And what we'd like for you to do right now is turn to your partner and answer this question. What is one insight you gained from taking this assessment? So here's the truth now, huh? Although your phone will tell you how much time you spend. Yeah, well, I have my OCD too. Yeah, I get it. I will tell you one that I don't like, and that you change it, which was great. I don't like when I always say, if you're chasing us, because my perception is, it's like he's running away. And so what I get, is if you're pursuing, you are seeking, which is, the vibe is bugging me.
I don't know why. There's another she has a hard time switching. She says that. No one else can. It makes it seem, because we sing that song about he's chasing us.
Yeah.
It's just weird. Because pursuing feels like he's coming towards you too. Pursuing is like I'm pursuing a relationship with you versus I'm chasing after you. Your back is. Yeah. He's a little or not here. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, she's so funny. But
oh,
I think
yeah, so now we have that. Yeah.
But now we have the sound thing, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds
Dude, the fact that it's just bizarre to me why he's.
Yeah. Ah, well. I know a lot of people like.
All right, finish up your conversation.
All right, so this is the part where we are going to test you. We're gonna, not only we're gonna test you, but we're gonna have some fun too, right? Here's what I want you to do. I want to test your listening skills, all right? I want you to listen to something, and then I'm gonna ask you to tell me what you heard.
So what you'll hear is a sentence, a spoken sentence, that's been transformed by a computer to sound like gibberish. So, any idea what they said?
No.
Okay, you can hear it one more time.
Anyone? Nope, no, it was not a bird. And for those of you who are thinking R2D2, no. Okay? Anybody want to guess? No? Should we do it one more time?
Okay, you can hear it one more time.
Anybody? Okay, listen. Because otherwise we're going to be here all day long. The Constitution Center is at the next stop. The Constitution Center is at the next stop. Can you repeat that?
Constitution Center is at the next stop.
Do you guys have supper today? Come on.
The Constitution Center is at the next stop.
Hit it.
Okay, now we'll hear the real sentence.
The Constitution Center is at the next stop.
Does it make sense that time?
Yeah, wait, was that the
It was
same?
the exact same sentence that you heard the first time.
No way.
It's the exact same sentence. Your brain is always using prior information to make sense of new information coming in. So once you know what the sentence is, when you go back and hear the distorted version, you can apply that information and it makes sense.
All right. So now we're using neuroscience. So this is scary, okay? So the brain is not wired to perceive what it doesn't know. You do not know what you don't know. Your brain is constantly using past experiences and information to make sense of the reality. All of these people in here has a different past, has different experiences. So you are interpreting what you're hearing and seeing very differently. Nobody is doing it the same way. Now, the other things that happen, you heard this probably 4 times and you couldn't get it, right? But once your brain caught up with it, what happened? You understood it, right? Okay, what happened if that was misinformation and disinformation? Will your brain still use it? Yes, your brain will still use it. So now imagine yourself in front of your TV or your computer and you're listening to misinformation, disinformation, false or fake news, and your brain is consuming that. What do you think is going to happen? Your brain is going to use it. You have to be hyper self-aware, to control, whether that information comes out or not, right? But we're not. Right now, I'm going to tell you, right now, all of us are receiving about 11 million pieces of data per second. And we're only capable of processing 40. Or we are receiving about 8 billion bits of information, and we're only capable of processing real-time 0.0000004%. Nothing. So what that means is that we are relying on our brain, autonomous brain. So we are relying on our system one brain, which is our unconscious brain, to drive what we do. So we're not constantly aware of what we're saying or what we're doing. The other things that is important to take from this exercise is called priming. I did something to you that you were not aware that I was doing. How many times did I ask you to repeat it? Twice, right? So when we hear repetition, that repetition create automatic neurological pathways in our brain, and we begin to see what we want to see. We begin to hear what we want to hear. So priming is something that happens constantly in social media, news media, repetition of certain pieces of information to the point that people begin to internalize it and actually begin to use it as if it was true. So that's why this is very important. So do you want to do the next one?
We have these take-home things.
Okay. Yeah, let me do the take-home things, because so you got a few exercises here. So here is this is a website that you can go to. So we only have a picture here, and what we're looking is a digital media. This is not for us to discuss. Well, this is this is true for this particular news outlet, or this is not true for this one. Once you get into this particular site link, actually, you begin to expand, you begin to interplay with it, and you can see that some of this outlet may not be where you think it is. But this will just give you an idea where some of these particular media and news outlet, where they stand in this continuum, from left to right. The next one is another kind of picture of how social media became, social media, right? It began with algorithm to help us, connect with each other, and we thought it was good. And eventually, those algorithms began to do what? They began to learn our habits to do what? To predict our behavior. And we saw that, we can make money out of that, right? So Facebook make about $80 billion just by selling your information, based on what they know about you. The next one, let me see, do we have another one? Yeah, that's it pretty much. But these are just a couple of tools to help you create media literacy. And also there are so much more, but this is, tonight is not the night to really go into into this particular area.
We want to do like 4 2-hour seminars, but we're holding back.
Yes.
We're holding back.
Absolutely.
We do really recommend that book that we mentioned, Faith and Fake News. You can get it anywhere books are sold. Rachel's a part of our church, but what excellent way for us to think through the way in which our faith is impacted when we're having this information. I'm going to give you guys a confession. I don't know if you've seen this before. The Heinz tomato clear ketchup. I saw this on the internet. Told a handful of people about this, including my husband. It is not a thing. This is just somebody who took a Heinz bottle and some, I don't know what they did, but put some hair gel in there or something. And I told a bunch of people that there was clear ketchup and it tasted like actual ketchup because I didn't fact check, all right? Relatively harmless, but that's how easy it is for us, right? Where we're like, oh, did you know that there was, where did I even see that? I don't know. That's how easy it is for us. And sometimes it can be a lot more consequential than false Heinz products, of course.
And Stephanie, one thing too that we need, this is where it gets a little bit scary for us as Christian. Every time that we every time that we forward, some of these things, we're actually contributing. We are becoming part of that collective that is creating that. And we don't want to be, that's not who we were created to be. Or when we find, things, that validate, or confirm our own biases, and we share that with somebody because, hey, here, I know that you believe what I believe. That's also create more otherness and more polarization, and it put people in this isolated boxes or echo chamber that doesn't, give us an opportunity to see what other people are doing.
Absolutely. So if you want a code word with your friend or your spouse, you can say like, is that clear ketchup, or did we actually fact check that? Yeah. Right? Okay, there you go. All right. Now, you might have noticed that step 1, self-awareness, is the longest one. Interesting. Okay, one more part of self-awareness that I want to bring up, and that is what we call we-awareness. This is really important. Because the information is being fed at us and we're being told these things, the truth is that Americans are actually less ideologically polarized than we think that we are. So if polarization means people's views are way over here or way over here, it actually is more of a spectrum, even today. But we have come to believe this is true about ourselves. However, our politicians are much more ideologically polarized than the general population. This is something that can be studied. And they're more polarized than any time in the last 50 years. Even though we are not as ideologically polarized as we believe ourselves to be, we are emotionally polarized. That's called affective, not effective. It's never effective. It's affective, our emotions. Affective polarization. In other words, we do not like those who have different opinions than we do. This is called a perception gap. We have a gap in our perception on what's true of us than what is actually true. And affective polarization causes us to feel like the divide is wider than it is. And so if you live next door to somebody who put a different sign in your yard than you did, your assumption is we are on the farthest end of the spectrum from each other, but statistically that's probably not true. And we are coming to believe this. That's affective polarization. This feels like an important part of just our self-awareness as a community and as Americans, what that actually means here in North America, in the U.S. Okay, so we made it to step 2. Everybody give yourselves a round of applause. We made it to step 2. Okay, good job. All right, step 2 is pretty short, but I want to just talk a little bit about this, and that is, what does it mean for us to reframe our goals when we're having conversations with people that are different than us, that believe different things than us in faith, in politics, in ideological things, whatever. We often approach others with the goal to change their mind to win an argument. Now someone's like, no, I don't do that. Do we do that? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Statistically, this goal is near impossible. Let you just think about if you've been effective at this before. Statistically, this goal is near impossible. What other goals might we have for depolarizing conversations and relationships across differences of opinion? Because we gotta let go of what often is the primary goal. I mean, it seems pretty silly to have a goal that we know is statistically very, very rare or impossible. All right. So what would be some other ones? We've got some written down here for you. Maybe you'd add something to this list, but really the top 4 we can think of is to humanize people. These people are made in God's image. To empathize or to be able to understand someone's viewpoint. That is a great tool in personal growth, is to understand other people better. And if we can do that, if we can truly try to understand, we can reduce unnecessary conflict, but we can also have a deeper dialogue. How might you imagine being in that person's shoes? That's so good for our brains and our hearts. And then relating with other people with love. Love your neighbor and even love your enemy, Jesus says. So that would be a much better goal than change the person's mind. Loving our neighbors is dependent on staying in a relationship, even if that relationship has to have boundaries. We're not against boundaries. Sometimes with certain family members, friends, we need to say, hey, that's where my limit is in this conversation. We'll talk about that a little in a minute. But what about relating with love and then having compassion? Jesus chose to suffer out of love for us. So when we think, oh man, this conversation, it's so difficult to listen to this person, I just disagree with them. Hey, it's not the suffering Jesus went through for people that didn't deserve it. So what does it look like for us to listen to others, to seek to understand? What other goals do you have for depolarizing contentious conversations with people in your life? I'm going to just encourage you just for a minute. We'll give you just 30 seconds of silence. Who's someone that comes to mind, and what would be a better goal in your relationship with that person than changing their mind? You could write their name down if you want to, but think about that. What's one name that comes to mind, and what's a better goal that you have? Maybe it's different than these four. Just think about that for a minute. You might want to write it down in the box, and we'll give you 30 seconds, and then we'll move to the next part. Whatever name or names of people that you thought of just now, Jesus loves them as much as he loves you. He doesn't love them more. He doesn't love them less. There's nothing they could do to cause him to love them less or more. There's nothing you could do to cause him to love you less or more. And so it's deep for us to think about what our goals are in those relationships. All right, short but important to reframe our goals. The next step hopefully doesn't seem shocking, and that is to listen, to engage listening if we're going to have those other goals that we just suggest. If your goal is to change someone's mind, you might want to do all the talking, right? Again, impossible, probably, but if we're going to do these other goals, the ones you just thought of with those people in your life, we're going to need to be good listeners. Doesn't mean we don't share, but we start with listening. Let's just turn to page 14, and if you haven't yet, and before Ramon talks about the levels of listening, I just want to make sure that we name the things that are non-listening, and this is from a book called Are You Really Listening? And this is what the non-listening things are. Defending, so being quick to bring a defense before you're actually fully listening to someone. The Me Too syndrome, now this can sometimes seem like it's good. You're making a connection with something in your life. But that person has barely said more than 3 sentences, and now you're talking about how you had a cousin that you didn't agree with and your family reunion, and then we lost track of what that person was talking about. And then we've got giving advice or correcting. Most of us know in our minds and our hearts we're supposed to make sure that's what someone's asking for if we give it, especially our spouses and kids. And are you asking for advice, or do you want me to just listen to you, right? We know we're supposed to say that. That's key. And then finally, judging. Judging, not necessarily being judgmental, but making a judgment so quick in our minds that we haven't asked a few more follow-up questions to get to the actual thing. Oftentimes what somebody is saying right away, you need a few more questions to get at the heart of what they're saying. But when we judge quickly, we might breeze past the depth of what they're communicating. But there are the 4 levels of actual listening that we want to dig into.
Yeah, those non-listening things that she just mentioned, that Stephanie just mentioned, those are internal voices inside of us. Especially voice of judgment is one that is a standout, and being defensive is another voice. Whenever we engage with people, we get this voice that actually don't listen, because what that person is saying, may try to change, where you are with, in your or what are the things that you value and believe? And oftentimes what we do is we begin with rejection, right? So we need to turn those voices down. Now, for me, one of the biggest experience that I have was, going through this program to identify my level of listening, my 4 level of listening. It took me 28 days to get to generative listening, which is the most powerful way of listening. So journaling every day, every conversation, going back and forth, to trying to analyze, or just not only analyzing, but also seeing, how deep I was able to go in those conversations with the people that I was interacting with. The first level that we identify is downloading. Is just listening from your own habits of listening. It's actually just practically hearing. You're not listening. You're filtering to the same mental models that you have, developed. The next one is what we call factual listening. This is when you're having a conversation with somebody. That person may not be listening to you, but immediately you say something that sparked their interest, they find that place to connect, right? The next level of listening is when people start really listening, which is empathizing. Empathizing is connecting with people at the heart. You begin to listen to the person. You begin to see from their perspective what they're trying to say. You begin to acknowledge and to take into account what they are trying to convey. But the most powerful way of listening is generative listening. This is when I'm listening with such intention and attention, both of them, intention and attention, that whatever is happening in that conversation can actually lead me to expand my ability to think, my conceptual way of seeing other things. And as a result, I can just be a changed person. We went to seminary together, not at the same time, but we went to the same seminary. And the things that I learned, earlier before she went to seminary were amazing things. But as my pastor, I'm learning things, almost every Sunday. Almost.
Almost. Don't let me get a big head over here.
That completely changed, some of the, really, I don't say change, but transform my theological positions, right? That is what we call generative listening. It's an expansion. You never lose, but you expand your conceptual abilities.
That's such a good point, because sometimes we get a fear like, I'm going to lose this thing that I've always thought, and it's so precious and important. What if we make sure that we're careful to realize it's generative? We can still hold some things we care deeply about while we're expanding who we are. Yeah, great.
And attention. Intention and attention.
Attention.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna have another exercise with your partner. Don't need to turn the page. You can stay on the 4 levels of listening. In fact, do stay on the 4 levels of listening. All right. Here's what I'm gonna ask you to do. Let's pick a partner. You can do nose goes if you don't want to go first. That's what you do in my house if you don't want to go first. So someone's going to go first, and I'm going to give you 90 seconds to tell your partner about a movie or book you recently found interesting. You can't respond to them. You can only ask more questions in 90 seconds, okay? So who's going to go first and share something that they found interesting? You got it? Ready? That person needs to go. Ready, go. Share about something, a movie or book you found interesting. Leslie's texting me. Leslie, let's send her a selfie. Still. Right, stop, stop, stop. Now, listener, guess what? You have 30 seconds to tell them as much as you can remember about what they just said. Ready, set, go, go, go. You have 30 seconds. All right, stop, stop, stop. How'd they do? Thumbs up. Okay. All right, now you're going to give them a taste of their own medicine, and you get to have 90 seconds. Switch. You got 90 seconds to tell your partner one book or movie you recently found interesting. Go.
Husbands, please make us look good.
Listen. All right, now you know. Let's give them your 30 seconds of what you heard. Ready, go. Oops.
But the reality here is when it's like, yeah, the part that is scary is the safety part that you just go, man, I can't believe I'm just how stupid, right? To do that. But at the same time, it's like, wow, I do that, right?
All right. Good job. All right. Here's my question for you guys. I wonder, as you were responding, as you were listening, I wonder, what are your assumptions about how they felt about the book or film? Did your person say how they felt emotionally? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. How did they interpret the word interesting? That's one of our favorite things in Minnesota, isn't it? Interesting sometimes means intellectually stimulating. Sometimes I enjoyed it. Sometimes it means that was a terrible film and I don't recommend it. But how did they interpret the word interesting, right? Different meanings. What would they recommend the book or film? Maybe you got to that, I don't know. And what impacted them about the story? Is there something that impacted them? To get the answers to these questions, you'd probably need to ask more questions. Listen longer. 90 seconds wasn't long enough to get most of these questions. And this is just about a book or a film. What if we're talking about something much more critical to our lives? If you turn the page to page 15, you'll see that there's also just this reflecting on your own listening. What does it mean for us to reflect on our own listening? Have you listened to yourself? And what we mean by that is, what do you mean by any words or phrases that have complex meaning in our context? What did you mean by the word interesting? When you're talking with loved ones, when you're talking with colleagues, you're using words that maybe they don't have the same meaning, but have you listened to yourself? Do you know why you hold the perspectives you have? We spent all that time on self-awareness. We didn't even get into our family systems or the cultural backgrounds we had. Why? Why do you have, how do you come to the perspective you hold? What experiences in your life have shaped your perspective? Somebody who has experienced something traumatic in a certain area is going to have a very different experience. Someone who's experienced a lot of success in an area is going to have a very different perspective. What emotions are connected to your perspective? This is one of the hardest things, and I honestly think for those of us in warm or in cold climate cultures like Minnesota is, some of you might be from warm climate cultures like Ramon is. We in cold climate cultures have a really hard time naming our emotions. It's just something we really struggle with. People say, like, how do you feel? And you're like, I feel interested in that topic. And you're like, well, interested isn't the feeling. Right? So we got to be able, could we even name the emotions that we feel about our deep views on education, or, like, what emotions come with that? We need to be able to name those. We'll talk about those more in a minute. But then, have we listened to other people enough to understand? Have I listened to people deep long enough? What do they mean by those words or phrases? Actually stopping a conversation and saying, let's get a shared definition on that word. Because maybe you don't even agree with their definition, but at least you know that you're using the same one, right? Why does this person hold that perspective? What experiences in their life has shaped their perspective? I've had some conversations where we got an hour in and then someone's like, well, I feel this way because of how I was treated when I got home from Vietnam. What? We were talking about that for the last hour? My goodness, that's deep. That was one of the most traumatic experiences of his life. We got to ask questions and listen long enough to know. And then what emotions are connected to their perspective? Sometimes we can see those emotions. Sometimes we need to ask more questions. One of my favorite questions to ask when I see someone giving emotions, if we trust each other, I might say, do you have any words for the emotions that I can see right now? That would really help me in listening to you and helping people name their emotions. Listening builds trust. Are we earning trust? I can teach people about these listening things every other week, and it's a good reminder for me. So I'm just coming to you humbly saying this is such a critical thing for us in our lives. So step 3, listening. And now we're going to double click on the emotions thing so you can turn the page, and Ramon will take it from there on page 16.
Yeah, I really love this, teaching about emotional intelligence. But just listening to, Steph, the last few things that she covered, so important to understand what is the program of our mind, all those experiences, including our emotional context, in which we have grown. All of that determine how those interactions are going to be, to be like. Have you ever heard somebody says, put your emotion aside, or don't be emotional? That's one of the biggest problems that we have. As a matter of fact, you hit on it, only 36% of the people in this country can accurately name their emotion. What percent? 36%. 36. I mean, 64.
They're all in Minnesota.
Yeah, 36%. So 64% of us cannot name their emotions. So there has to be a way to teach people a little bit about emotional literacy. But what is so important about emotion is that emotions and feelings are different. Emotions are physiological reaction. They are biochemical reaction to a stimulant, right? Something, you're going to have a tough conversation with Dale. I'm going to have a tough conversation with Dale. But suddenly my heart starts pumping and my hands start sweating, right? So that's the emotion. Emotion are like fire alarm, that they are conveying some information about what's going on. So if your house is burning and your alarm is going on, would you turn it off and ignore it? No, we can't ignore our emotions, right? So emotions are biochemical reactions to something that is happening around us. We need to pay attention to them. And when we bring a certain level of consciousness about that emotion and we are able to name that emotion, that's when we become a feeling. So a feeling is the level of understanding the conscious awareness that we have about that emotion. And then the next step is the behavior. So what is the emotion, what is the feeling, and what is that leading you to behave in the way that you behave? So when we talk about emotional intelligence, it's very simple, 4-quadrant, and it's moved from the internal to the external, right? Self-awareness was the first things that we started. And I love when Jesus says, take the plank out of your own eyes. That to me is, yay. That is self-awareness. Understand yourself. So are you aware of your emotions as they're happening? That's self-awareness. Self-management is, can you manage those emotions as they're happening to a positive outcome? And we're going to show you how to do that in a moment, right? Now, the next step is social awareness. Are you aware of other people's emotions as you're interacting with them? And then relationship management. Do you know how to manage those emotions, your emotions and their emotions, and bring it to a positive outcome? That is emotional intelligence 1.0. Now, within each and every those quadrants, there are other skills that need to be, skill sets that need to be developed, about 12 more. Daniel Goleman is the father of emotional intelligence if you want to dig deeper, or Travis Bradbury, emotional intelligence 2.0. Is something that you can grow to the nth degree. Your IQ, there's nothing I can do about it. What God gave you, that's what you have. EQI, I can help you grow it to the nth degree. There's no ceiling to that. So that's practically what is emotional intelligence. So I'm going to show you in the next page. It's in your handout. It's Plushkey. Wheel of Emotion. So this is a tool that we use to teach emotional literacy. As you can look in the circle, the center circle, the next petal, the next circle outside of the main circle, those are the primary emotions. So in this case, disgust, anger, anticipation, and joy, trust, fear, and surprise are the primary emotion. As you move toward the outside of the petals, those emotions become less intense. As you move toward the center of the circle, they intensify. And if you look at one petal and you look at the other side, the opposite side, that is the opposite emotion, the opposite feeling to that one. Now, what is really cool too here is the spaces in between. That is the combination of the two primary emotions. Disgust and sadness will give you remorse. Sadness and surprise will give you disapproval. Fear and trust will give you submission. So this is a great tool to be used for, to learn more and understand more about your emotions. There are a couple of other exercises here that I think are really important. It's something that I use when I'm doing some coaching. The Dirty Dozen is an exercise that you can do on your own later on. There are a lot of things baggages that we bring into relationship that we need to be aware of it. The next one is one of my favorite one, is what we call hot button exercise. And what I love about this is what we have to do is just complete the sentence, right? It makes me angry when Pastor Stephanie doesn't blah, 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 right? It makes me, I don't like it when people, so if we know these things beforehand, then we know how to manage, them. And the other things that we just added recently is this curiosity curve. This is important because this is actually looking at what mindset you're bringing into this conversation. If it is self-righteous, that is a very ethnocentric way of thinking about that interaction that you are going to have. And you will go from self-righteousness to confident dismissal to a skeptical tolerance. All of these things actually are things that, that we carry that are putting us in what we call a confirmation bias box or ideological box. When we break outside of that box is when we move into cautious openness, genuine interest, and eventually to fascinated wonder. It's not that we are trying, for people to change how they think or what they believe, but it's just to at least come to a point where you can engage with people. And the last piece that we have in here that I think is, probably the most useful, that I love this, is the mood elevator. The mood elevator, if you think about an elevator, right, you have the ground floor, and then anything below are negative emotions and feelings, and then above are positive emotions and feelings. So the whole idea about the mood elevator is if you know that you are in one of those negative mood or emotions, is at least wait until you are to a point of curiosity or at least, joyful when, to have those conversations. Never make decisions in time of desolation, but in time of consolation. The decisions are not going to be good. If you look at the behavior con here, your level of quality, the thinking of your quality is going to decrease when you are not in a better state of mind, right? So as a result, when your emotions are at a higher level, your decisions and the quality of your decisions are going to be better. So these are just tools that we can use to help us manage ourselves. It's more about self-management. But then there are other tools that we probably, bring on in a different
Yeah, this is
conversation.
actually, we could do like 3 hours together on emotional intelligence. We're both kind of obsessed with it. So we'll cut ourselves off. We also, emotional intelligence assessment, at the end, we'll let you know where you can get all of our resources online where we recommend a specific test. So you'll see that in a minute. All right. We have made it, ladies and gentlemen, to step 5, the final step. And that is actually having a dialogue. Oh my, we're supposed to take 4 steps before we get into a dialogue with someone else? Okay, that's maybe just an aha moment for all of us. But let's just make sure we recognize that every time we're going to have a dialogue with someone else that we know is contentious, we find out within the first couple of minutes is going to be contentious, or we have maybe planned ahead to have a conversation with someone that we know it's going to be difficult in various ways. I just want to say the number one thing we need to start with is we need to start with the Spirit. We absolutely believe as Jesus followers, not only that Jesus shows us a way to be, but that Jesus promised to send the Spirit to empower us. What is the Spirit? A counselor, a guide, one that will remind us of what Jesus said. We know that the Holy Spirit gives us the ability to do things we would never be able to do on our own. I am not patient enough to be someone who stays married. So the Holy Spirit is the one who's allowed me to stay married to my husband, JD, and he is very grateful for the Holy Spirit in my life. Like, do you understand? Like, we do not have the fruits of the Spirit have to be with the Spirit in our life, not trying harder. It has to be surrendering more to the Spirit in our lives. As Jesus followers, that is the greatest asset we have. We've given you tools. We are going to talk about a way of having a dialogue. But if we go into these things without the greatest asset we have in our lives, as Jesus followers, we're missing the advocate, the counselor, and the guide, which Jesus says he has sent. And it's going to lead to peace. My peace I give you. There's that shalom again. That's what we are invited to do. So start with the Spirit. If you're in a conversation and you go, oh, it's getting contentious, you just got a minute to be like, Spirit, I am ready. I'm surrendered. Like, I need you now. And if you know you're going to be going to travel visit some relatives, or you're planning on having a difficult conversation with your supervisor or with someone you supervise, let's build up that time of prayer and welcoming the Spirit in. We just don't want to understate how critical that is, even as we're about to talk about some skills when it comes to dialogue and to how to do that well. So how our conversations with people in our lives, how can we have what I call, you can see it says there, a conscious dependence on the Holy Spirit. That's the way I put it, a conscious dependence on the Holy Spirit. If we're going to do that, we have to remember, we said this at the beginning, there's a difference between a debate and a dialogue. A debate starts with answers on both sides. No one is coming to learn from the other person. Rather, the goal is to win. Was anyone on like a debate team or something? This is fun. This is what the point of it, right? A debate team is like, you're going to get a score, and there's nothing wrong with that, but let's just remember that is not the same as a dialogue. It literally has the goal of getting a score, okay? So if we're going to talk about dialogue, I don't have any skills to give anyone today about debating. I don't think I've actually won most debates in my life that I've found myself in. And in our lives, it's not debate team. There is no score. Everybody loses. Everybody loses. In our personal lives, it's got to be dialogue. And that's why it starts with questions and curiosity, which you'll notice the curiosity curve, and then the bottom, the lobby of the elevator is curiosity. If we can get there, I'm curious about where someone's going to go. So that's what we need to be able to remember. Now you'll see at the bottom of page 21, I'm offering you a free Peacemaker tip. That is, I'm just going to say it's my opinion. Dialogues don't belong online. Facebook feeds and text messages and emails result in deep miscommunication and cause us to be more easily unkind and devalue others. You can disagree with me if you want, but in my opinion, if the text message is so long that you have to scroll more than 2 times with your thumb, that is too many words that are there that are probably emotions being conveyed that we're not actually talking about, and you don't know that person's tone. The amount of times I'm sitting down with a couple or some roommates that can't get along, and they're like, let me pull up the text message. I'm going, you talked about that just on text? At some point, how do we try, even if you're maybe you're dialoguing with a relative that doesn't live nearby, even Zoom can help us, right? Because of our communication coming from our body language. In my opinion, I have never seen anything effective on Facebook when it comes to dialogue. It's just not a place to do that in a healthy way. I've seen a couple people respond in ways that seem like kind of constructive, but honestly, people aren't going to that medium to actually learn. They're just not from each other. They're going there for their echo chamber. So, in my opinion, let's take it into IRL, or in real life. All right. Page 22 gives the dialogue skills. This is also from Braver Angels. Actually, the founder of Braver Angels, which is not a faith-based organization, even though it has the word angels in it. He is a person of faith, and he's here in the Twin Cities. He started this year, but it's now being used all over the country. Very effective tools. They have a dialogue skill called LAP, L-A-P-P. Skills for Depolarizing Dialogue. I think that's one of the weirdest acronyms I've ever seen, right? LAP.
Yes, let me say something about
Okay, go
Braver
ahead.
Angel.
You know more about that.
I spent a little bit of time with Dr. Doherty on another journey, about 2 years, designing a program for couples on the brink. But it is important to know that you may see some criticism about Braver Angels, and just, in their defense, they are not, this organization is not, there to change the mind of those extremists, but it's just creating a platform where people can come and have dialogue. So you can see criticism online about, well,
everything.
They didn't solve the problem, or they didn't. That's not what this organization is about. People, we're not here to change people. We trust in the power of the Holy Spirit to create that conviction and transformation. But the job needs to be done by the individual. But, it is, criticism that I think is unfair to this organization.
We can find criticism of most things on the internet, but yes, good point. Good point. So the goal for their skills is not actually about the blogosphere or the political realm. It's about interpersonal. And the criticism is mostly about how they're not affecting some of these bigger picture things. But in personal relationships, I know people who have used these skills, and they are still married. They are still going to family reunions together. They are still working together in companies because they have learned this. That's how effective I know it can be in interpersonal relationships. Okay, so I do think this is one of the weirdest acronyms. I don't know if it's going to be easy to remember, but now I remember it. LAPP, it stands for something. Stands for listen, acknowledge, pivot, perspective. Well, that's good. We already talked quite a bit about listening. When we come into a moment dialogue, ideal for us to start with listening. Ask some questions. We don't know you don't know how much time you have. Maybe you have a half an hour, but ask enough questions up front to really listen. Try to understand, empathize. Start with a question, not an answer, and engage curiosity. Then 2, acknowledge what you heard, and if possible, share any way that you might agree. You're going, I already know there's no way that we agree. Here's the thing. If you're both passionate about a subject, there is something you agree about. If you can get into it with your relative about education and how it should be done in America and the United States, guess what you have in common? You care about education. You care about how kids are educated. You might have the most different approach, but you do have that in common. Could you find that and acknowledge, I can see that we both really care about this subject? 3, pivot to signal a shift in the dialogue to wait and see if the person is willing to listen. This might seem a little weird. You're like, wait, to see if they're willing to listen. Sometimes someone's body language is telling you already they're not going to listen, yeah? Other times, if you ask someone and say, thanks for sharing, could I share my perspective on that? I have a different perspective. Could I share it? If the person says no, don't. Right? I mean, if we reframed our goals, if the person said, because if you don't ask them and the answer would have been no, this is completely pointless, what we are doing now, to share something that someone is not open to, right? And then P, offer a perspective or a depolarizing viewpoint, So if you look at each of these things, you'll see how they have given some examples here. Listening, turn off your arguing back mindset, listen for the other person's values and emotions and viewpoint. Do you see how it says there and under listen, strong emotions could mean a deeper story is there? Wow, what if we got to those stories more often? Resist the temptation to stop listening because of stereotypes. Okay, acknowledge. There's the examples here. You can say, I can see you have strong feelings about this. You know, I can hear that. That must have been really hard for you. So I think what you're saying is this. We all know the parroting back to someone can feel awkward, but how many times do they say, well, that's actually not what I meant to say? What I hear you saying is, am I hearing you? These kinds of things. And then I can see that we both really care about this. Is there any agreement that you have? I agree with you on this. Pivot, signal the shift. You can see there. I've become so worried about our community's polarization. I've started to understand perspectives better. I'd like to share some of my thoughts with you. I'm with you on being concerned. Can I share another perspective? See what someone says about that if they're willing to hear it. Again, if you ask them if you can share your perspective and they say no, don't. Yes, okay. I just think don't. Just don't. All right, and then when you turn the page to page 23, you'll see perspective options. I love that they're just giving some very clear, you're going to have to put things in your own words. But I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm like, okay, I understand that in a concept, but what would that sound like? A perspective shifting comment, something that is depolarizing is something like, not everybody feels the same way about that. I've learned that there's another perspective on this. I've discovered other people have different views, or it's more complicated than that. Guess what? It's almost always more complicated than that. And so say, I think it's more complicated. I see some complexity, and share a little bit more about the complexity that you're seeing. Different backgrounds and experiences. If you have a different background than the other person, you can share that. You might have been listening to people who have different backgrounds and you might want to share, or you read about them, you read some stories that people have written about their experience. How about this one? Our side hasn't been perfect on this matter. This is a moment when we realize that some of the deepest depolarization work that we're all called to is with people who actually share similar views to us. Think about this for a minute. The people who vote similarly to us might be the very people who are polarized, who are using polarized language, name-calling, blaming, stereotyping, ridiculing. And our call is actually with the people we agree with to say, hey, that's too far. Can I offer a little bit more understanding, even if we're not going to, I agree with you, we voted the same way, but let's humanize these other people. I think for a lot of us, our deepest calling is amongst people who vote similar to us, who hold a similar view to us, who have the same faith as us, but who have started to get polarized and who have started to get divisive in the way that they're thinking and feeling. And if we think that way, we realize, oh, wow, we've got a lot of work to do. I know these friends that I need to talk to and say, hey, let's talk a little bit about how we can keep talking about these important subjects that we actually agree on while still humanizing other people. Our side hasn't been perfect on this matter. And then finally, maybe saying something like, I don't know if it's useful to dismiss them totally. I'm with you. I'm tempted to dismiss, but what about this? Or, hey, I feel like that's dismissing people. Here's my perspective I can offer. Now, you got to think about how that might sound to you, which one of those things really is natural for you, but it can be really helpful. So what I'm going to do now is you can turn the page to page 24. I know this is the most awkward part, but I'm going to give you very, very, very clear steps to actually practice this, okay? I have two polarized people, polarized person A and polarized person B, and one of you is going to be polarized person A. Whoever shared about your movie or your book earlier, first, you're person A. You doubt you agree with what I wrote here, but you're going to, for tonight, okay? And then the other person's person B, all right? So listen to these polarized people. What about this language is polarized versus just a position or an understanding, right? Person, polarized person A. People who want to keep kids from learning cursive in school are ridiculous. Don't they care about tradition? Our kids won't even be able to read grandma's handwriting. Only an idiot would cripple a child so early in their development. It's basically teaching kids to disrespect their elders and reject more refined communication. What amazes me is how many people get duped by big tech and their goal to discourage kids from even writing full sentences with punctuation. All right, but unfortunately, polarized person A is sitting with polarized person B. Oh my goodness. People who want schools to teach cursive should go back to the Stone Age where they belong. Kids these days don't need to practice handwriting at all. They've got computers in their pockets. Only an idiot would waste precious time during a child's education on pointless and stupid exercises, not to mention wasting paper and destroying the environment. What amazes me is how many people blindly accept tradition and are so delusional that they think we can go back in time. Now, if you were to underline the parts of these statements that are polarizing, some of you are like, well, it's all of it. Okay, but there's some specific things that we're seeing here. It's these kinds of name-calling words or words that are giving labels to people. They are ridiculous. They are idiots. Only an idiot. These types of words. Terrible things. And maybe most of us wouldn't say these things out loud, but there's been times it's gone through our hearts and our minds. That's a big part of polarization. Also, just kind of pushing something to the extreme, of course. And then finally, it's very common in polarized language to start to loop in other issues that aren't actually connected. Do you see how what does this have to do with big tech? Well, okay, kind of, but not really. What does this have to do with destroying the environment? Hold on. Did we just change subjects? With polarized conversations, sometimes it's like someone else has like a TV remote and they're changing the channel on the subject and we're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Depolarizing is saying, let's talk about the main thing that we're talking about here, and it's about education. Some of you here are like, I actually know the research on the cursive thing. Okay, I know that. I know. There is research on people's brains. Totally, okay? But don't worry about it. You can talk about that in the lobby on the way out. What I'm asking you to do is to practice what we just talked about, all right? And so person A, the person who shared your book or movie first, you are going to look at that person that you are partners with, and you're going to read earnestly. People who want to keep kids from learning cursive in school. Okay, you're going to be the polarized person, all right? Now, if you're the partner, I want you to turn the page back, and if you feel like this is just the most uncomfortable thing that any pastor has ever asked you to do, just read one of them. Okay, so you're just listening. Okay, I'm listening to you. Maybe ask one follow-up question and see how they do. And then acknowledge, I can tell that you, okay? And then pivot, would you like to hear my perspective? Person, for this one, just say yes, but you can say yes however you want. You can say, I guess, whatever, but don't say no for the purpose of this exercise. And then offer a perspective, okay? But the answers are here for you. So if you're feeling like this is just absolutely way out of my comfort zone, well, actually, if it's that far, you don't have to do it. But if you can keep it within your comfort zone, you can just read it right here. And then guess what? You're going to switch. And person B is going to earnestly read, people who want schools to teach cursive should go back to... Okay, do you get what I'm saying? All right, so we're going to give you a timer for these things too, and you're going to go back and forth. One timer for both of you to do it, okay? And so get your person A, person B. Start with person A. Ready, set, go. Ready, set, go. All right, make sure person B gets to go at some point here soon if they haven't yet. All right, take a little bit more time if you need to, but wrap it up here in a minute. I said to finish up. I think his daughter is the one that led him to Christ.
But what was really good was we didn't try anything during that time. When the Holy Spirit is ready, right? So he heard. He had to work on this document to help the church.
He heard the gospel. All right, finish up your conversation. You're done. Front row's done. Okay, everybody. We're coming into land here. Please turn the page to page 25. Please turn the page to page 25. And I just want to point out something really important. You might need to be prepared to have a conversation off-ramp. Okay? Remember something important today. You are made in the image of God. And if someone in the way they're speaking to you is not treating you as such, you do not need to remain in that conversation. You can with love, exit that conversation. And so when we talk about on page 25, these conversation off-ramps, we might really need to think about those things. What could that look like? When people are flooded with emotions, you might have heard that statement before. You're too low on the mood elevator, or if they are too low on the mood elevator, then there isn't fruit that's going to come from the conversation anyway. If your conversation partner expresses directly or indirectly that they want to have a debate instead of a dialogue, it's appropriate to say, oh, actually, I'm not interested in a debate. If your conversation partner expresses directly or indirectly they don't want to hear your perspective or that they'd like to monologue, you can listen to the monologue for a while, but it ceases to become a dialogue. If your conversation partner is being unkind to you, you don't have to endure someone's unkindness to you. So we can plan to be able to say, hey, I'm just giving you some idea of where I'm coming from. We don't have to agree. Maybe we should just move on. Or these are tough issues. I'm going to take a break. Now, could we take a break? Maybe you need to say, I am going to take a break. I'd rather not debate any further. Perhaps we can talk again sometime with the goal of deeper understanding. Or I'd love to pause our conversation at this point. My hope is we can treat each other with kindness and respect even though we disagree. I mean, one that's not on there is that with a lot of these people in our lives, if they're family members, for instance, we're hoping for the long haul. We don't have to accomplish all of it in one conversation. To say, hey, I have reached my ability to be a good version of myself in this conversation. Let's pause and let's come back to it another time. That is okay. Or to say, hey, I love you too much for us to keep talking about this way. There's lots of ways we can get out of these conversations in healthy ways. And to say, hey, because actually listening to someone when they're being unkind is not love. Listening to someone when they're trying to share their story and they're maybe stumbling through it, yeah, but once they're being unkind to you, you don't have to stay in that conversation. You might choose to do that if you feel called to that, but what I'm saying is I do think you need to be ready to get out of a conversation. If you know you flipped your lid and sometimes we talk about our reptile brain or we're in the mood elevator basement. Oh, any of those things, like we have no point in having this conversation anymore. What would be the off-ramps to dialogue that you need to be ready to have? Page 26 and 27, or just page 26, I guess here, we have some things that we offered from the AND campaign. You can read those if you want. They're specifically focused on years where there's elections, which, pretty much is every year, I think. So there's these 10 disciplines. If you are really wanting to go deeper in some of the political stuff, the AND campaign, I wouldn't say we agree with everything they're talking about, but they're a good resource to look into. And so they have these 10 practices, disciplines for people during election year. Final thoughts, and then I want to make sure you have these next steps for you, and then Ramon will kind of pray us out, and we'll go from there. But on page 27, let's remember, polarization is not going to disappear. We are living in polarized times that are more polarized, but they're always going to be there sometimes, right? That's not going to go away. So let's try to take a lifelong pursuit goal to this. Not I went to that seminar once that those random people they brought to my church. Like, that's good, but what is the lifelong pursuit? Your peacemaking influence in your relationships and social circles will grow over time. Remember, we were talking about building trust. When you listen to people, when you're emotionally intelligent, that starts to build trust with people. People feel psychologically safe around you, and they will begin to share more. A good ally is able to see all perspectives, even if they hold their own positions. That has been a personal goal of mine. I want to understand other people's positions as well as I understand my own. That is hard. That is so hard. But man, is it fruitful to really understand other people's positions. Listening to other people's positions and being able to understand them as well as I understand mine has very rarely caused me to totally flip sides on something, but it has given me the ability to have more empathy, more understanding, and to build bridges and to build relationships across difference many, many times. Could you actually share like either side of person polarized A or B just as easily? And then what would be your next step of growth as a peacemaker? We have given here many next steps, okay? So if you go to that website, lovingourneighbors.church, Peacemaking Resources, you'll see that there's some resources just about how to love the neighbors that live around you or work with you. And then we've curated peacemaking and depolarization resources. And we did the best we could to pick resources that are not partisan. That's important to us. Some resources I thought, these are great, but I can really tell they're leaning in one way or the other. And so we've really tried to curate resources that are at the core trying not to be partisan. And so if you go there, you'll see a lot of the things we talked about today. We put some digital resources there. For instance, taking that emotional intelligence quiz. And so there's plenty of next steps and resources. Also, Ramon and I are working right now on a 2.0 to this training. We've had about 400 people go through this training in 2024. And so now this fall, we're working on having a 2.0 that we're going to offer. And so Dale is going to make sure that whoever gets the emails out to this group can say, oh, these people all registered, the people online, and you'll know about that. It'll be in November. And so you'll be invited to register for that and to come to that. But you'll have to come to us that time. At Mill City. Okay, but we're working on that because for those of you where this feels like important, I think a natural thing would be what's next. What's the deeper thing? So you have a lot of things you can take next steps with. Maybe the most important thing you could do next is to bring this information to someone else in your life. If you want to remember things you learned, if you repeat it to someone else in the next 24 to 48 hours, you have way more depth of understanding. So I would encourage you to make that a goal as you go from here. But we're going to offer just a quick commissioning to you, and then we'll stick around for a little while for anyone. I know you often have a Q&A here, but we'll dismiss everyone, and if people want to come chat with us, they can do that.
All right. Gracious Father, make me an instrument of thy peace. Teach me how to order my days, that with sure touch I might say the right word at the right time and in the right way. Lest it betray the spirit of peace. Let me not be deceived by my own insecurity and weakness, which will make me hurt another as I try desperately to help myself. Keep watch with me, O my Father, over the days of my life, that with abiding enthusiasm I may be in such a possession of myself that each day I may offer to thee the full unhampered use of me in all my parts as an instrument of thy peace. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. Thanks to those who are hosting. Appreciate it, you guys. You're dismissed. We'll come down here in the front if anyone wants to chat.